Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, February 14, 2022. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Boland.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper. Councilmember Jaxie.
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano.
Here.
Councilmember Flasher. Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Hey, thank you. Welcome again. We have 14 items under information before we get to action items. Is there anything under information that any member of the council would like to discuss or about which you may have questions? Councilmember Edens.
Yep, I have questions on several things, but I don't know if you want me to do one at a time or just combine them all, but
One at a time, please.
okay, I'll pick one and start with, I was wondering about the parks calendar, recreation event calendar. I did speak with Chair Bartoni. I was just wondering if it was possible to potentially put the Lawn and Garden Summit on that and the app, simply because there is no such thing as an economic development events calendar. And when I also checked the city website with the calendar at the bottom of the main page, it wasn't listed on that either. So we've got a really great event that's kind of floating in a calendar purgatory that has no home. And to quote Chair Bartoni, if it's not on a calendar, it doesn't exist. And so unless someone has another suggestion, I think that would be appropriate, especially because it's working with parks and planning adjacent city agencies like watershed.
So in a
erosion.
nutshell, you're wanting to do what? You want to move that where again?
Well, I think it would be nice to just include it on the events calendar.
Okay. Is there any objection from anyone to including that on the events calendar?
And on the Parks and Rec app.
On the Parks and Rec, what?
App has an events calendar as well.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Any objection to that? You're done? Good. It's approved. Next.
Thank you. Okay. The next item was on when you come back and provide the commercial vehicle updates, can we also go back and include the picture examples that we had a couple of years ago? I found that to be very helpful, as opposed to just the weight limits. This was so in 2020, there was a document that was attached that had examples of commercial vehicles.
And are you talking about for the discussion this evening?
Yes.
Okay, as long as the department has that, sure.
Yep. Okay. Because I know it's under for action, but I wanted to mention it now to give time in case anybody could put it on the screen for later. That's why I asked. And then my other comment was on the proposed fencing. It sounds like there wasn't a lot of support for looking at regulations within subdivisions, but part of the idea, and I certainly don't want to misquote you, Mayor Boland, but my understanding was it was twofold. It wasn't just to look at a review of additional regulations for subdivisions, but also for those homes that do not exist within subdivisions. And so my question is there a plan to look at that separately? Because I certainly know in my ward, I've got lots of homes that do not belong to HOAs. And if not, can we make sure that that's covered by the committee?
I would agree. I mean, at the end of the day, and I wasn't part of the committee's deliberations on this. I don't know how the vote went, if there was a vote or whatever, but I mean, this originated from our city attorney. He's recommended that we adopt at least a modicum level of I don't think we're intending to overregulate this, but we don't have much on the books. And I brought this up at council meetings previously and given a couple of examples as to how I think this could end up really causing a problem for us in the inability to explain to our residents when we see a fence that may be very unsightly and abrasive potentially. We don't have any rule on it. So I don't know what the discussion was. Mr. Vinich, would you enlighten us on that? And then we're going to come back if you're okay, Councilmember Edens, after he.
Take your time.
We'll come back. Okay. So Joe, can you tell us what's going on with this? What happened?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as you know, the committee was given the charge to kind of look at our fencing requirements and regulations as they stand today. And as the mayor just mentioned, there aren't many, and for the most part, govern inside town center. The committee has considered the fencing requirements and regulations and are going to create a very, I think, limited set of requirements to address public safety, to address what can be considered front yard areas, and then those out in the more rural component of the city of Wildwood. So there is a next step for the committee, but tonight the committee wanted to at least report that after 60 plus days, they are still working on the matter and had not forgotten it. Thank you.
I think I lost track when I was reading your report that they wanted to go forward with the existing regulations. So my apology for that. So it sounds like we are going to have some level of a new ordinance, I guess, proposed to the city council. So with that in mind, Councilmember Edens, what was your specific question or recommendation?
I think that answered it. I very much read it as that there was, no additional support. So
Okay,
that
that's-
clarified.
I
So
kind of
a
did
couple
that too.
things.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anything else?
Just under 4 action. So
Okay,
thank you.
Councilmember Garitano.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Boland. My question is regarding Center Avenue and just wanted to get an update on the title work and the estimated time of completion of that work there.
Mr. Bennett, would you like to respond to that?
Mr. Mayor, with your permission, I would defer to Mr. Young, our city attorney. His
Okay,
office
thank
is
you.
doing much of the work.
All right, City Attorney Young.
Would you mind restating the question just to make sure I'm clear on what the
Where are
question
we
is?
on the easements?
On the easements? Actually, we're actually quite close to them, and I anticipate we'll be able to have those within the week.
Okay, thank you. Is that, so if I heard you correctly, the title work will be by the end of the week, and then I'm assuming that doesn't include then getting that information out to those folks that need to sign. Is that right?
Actually having drafts of the easements prepared and ready to go by the end of this week.
Oh, good. So they'll be getting them next week or sometimes very soon then.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dodwell.
I just wanted to go back to what Councilmember Edens had requested regarding the fencing. Are we going to see the revised ordinance within the next month, within the next 6 months, within the next 2 years? When are we going to see that? I'd like to put a due date on it.
Okay, excellent question. And I think that that's largely, Mr. Bennett, correct me if I'm wrong, that's largely in the purview of the city attorney. So with that, I would ask our city attorney if he could give us an estimate.
Well, in terms of the drafting of the ordinance, I've not seen the committee recommendation as of yet, and when that would, what that would be. But once I get that formalized and finalized, we'll be putting it together. And it may require, it should go to P&Z as well, because I believe it's going to be zoning district specific, which means public hearings too. So we're thinking at least several months.
Why is it
Okay.
again? Why is it going to be several months again?
Because it would have to go through the P&Z process, so public hearing, public notice, because it will be zoning specific regulation.
When do you think it would be able, when do you think you'll be able to present them to see P&Z?
Right, not till it comes out of committee.
That's why I was asking the question of Mr. Vunich as to when would we see it come out of committee?
Well, I think the committee's going to need to see what the regulations, proposed regulations are going to be from you. So I guess the question then specifically is, when do you think you can present those to the committee?
I'll coordinate with Mr. Vunich on putting those together, and I would imagine we could probably get them a draft or something to review at least by the March meeting.
Okay. Do you want to set a time or are you good with that? Councilor Dodwell?
I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure we're moving on things.
Sounds like we're moving. Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, City Attorney Young. Anything else? All right, moving to action items. The first is commercial vehicle definition and test period. Mr. Vintage, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as you know, in the beginning of 2020, there was a desire on the part of City Council to assist our residents and businesses relative to the pandemic. Many steps were taken to ease the burden of the pandemic on our businesses, as well, and to a certain degree, our residents. One of those that was identified by the City Council was a change to our commercial vehicle definition in the zoning ordinance to allow individuals to bring home commercial vehicles from their place of work and have them parked on their driveway or in their garage. The committee spent almost all of 2020 working through potential changes to the current definition, which does restrict commercial vehicles in residential districts, including the non-urban resident district, more so than most in other municipalities around the city of Wildwood. Ultimately, a definition was decided upon, and that definition was to be presented in 2021. However, work on the strategic plan and rural internet dominated much of the work session timeframes that the City Council had set aside. At the end of 2021, it was the intent of the department to present that revised definition to the City Council. It was at that time that the city administrator, city attorney, and the Department of Planning and Parks had a conversation that maybe instead of changing the definition and memorializing it as part of the zoning ordinance, the change in the definition could be treated more so like we've done with certain regulations relating to signage, temporary buildings for restaurants, etc. Try it first, see how it works, and if it isn't a problem, then memorialize the changes in the zoning ordinance. So what the committee was presented with by the city administrator, city attorney, and department was just that. The committee concurred that maybe a test period through the end of the year would be appropriate. We could see how it works, see if it is a problem or not, and then if not, certainly make the changes at that time. So tonight, the committee is presenting to the City Council a proposal to do a test run of a change in the commercial vehicle definition. And that would mean limited enforcement of certain types, and then do a report thereafter. And then if it's a problem, you'll know as City Council. If it's not, you'll know the same, and we can move on from there. Thank you.
Okay. And then relative to the photographs that Councilmember Edens had requested, do we have those available?
Mr. Mayor, I did not think to include them as part of the presentation, so I do not have them available. Certainly, they can be provided as part of an email sent to all council people, but certainly, for the most part, this process does not need to be rushed. We've kind of been practicing it, so to speak, on an ongoing basis since the committee made the direction. So we could have this back in 2 weeks with all the information that's been requested by Ms. Edens and others.
And I guess if I may, I know Councilmember Clark wants to speak on this. In essence, Joe, just for purposes of the council's discussion at this point, what, if you had to pinpoint 1, 2, or 3 things that if a resident walks out of their house and they see a commercial vehicle parked that would be different if this moves forward either temporarily or permanently than what currently exists? What in a nutshell, as a practical standpoint, is this going to change?
With the current
and if I can, I ask that because we've had complaints, I know in Ward 8 previously, relative to commercial vehicles being parked in violation of our ordinances. So what are our residents going to see if this moves forward either provisionally or permanently?
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the first and foremost thing is they will see a vehicle with commercial signage or a commercial wrap in the driveway. Currently, that's prohibited. So first and foremost, someone can park a commercial vehicle in their driveway. Secondly, the size of the vehicles in terms of commercial types, it increased in size. And so those are the two major points.
And to continue, was there a request? I mean, were we getting complaints about this, or what's the genesis of this? Where did it, why did we start down this road, I guess?
Dr. Remy, when he was on city council, thought it was important that we take into consideration all those people that had once gone to an office, but were now working from home and may have a commercial vehicle in association with that employment. And so he asked the council for consideration of a change that was referred to committee, and I described the process previously.
And if I may follow up, have we had any residents ask for this, or this came solely from former Councilmember Remy?
My recollection is it came from Dr. Remy, former council person, but certainly I think he had heard from a couple of people, but I'm just not sure. I'd be secondhanding information.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Clark.
Yes, I still have some questions about the wording of this change in the definition that we put in. And I really think that it's good that you want to go slowly with this, because to try something that we don't have perfected for 6 months wouldn't do us a lot of good. We wouldn't know if it was the right thing or not. The wording seems ambiguous to me when I look at it. Specifications for the gross vehicular weight rating and the gross combined weight rating are significantly different. Gross vehicle weight rating is just the vehicle with passengers and the vehicle fully loaded, and the gross combined weight rating is with the payload, the load that it can carry, it can tow. So that's a broad range that we have there. If I went through and I took some pictures around town late last night, just thinking about this, and I found a number of vehicles that are commercial. I found a Chevy Colorado, which would comply with the gross vehicular weight ratio, and it would comply and not comply with the gross combined weight ratio. That is due to which model it was, which wheelbase. So it could be under 10,500 pounds or over 10,500 pounds. There's a Chevy Spark that's very covered with some kind of a wrap, and it would comply on both. There was a 2006 Ford Ranger truck that would comply with both. It's a bigger vehicle. It's still a small little truck, but it might look to someone like it's a pickup truck that should be controlled. Then a full size Chevy van, it complies and it doesn't comply. Again, a Ford van, it complies and it does not, and it doesn't comply, depending on which weight you pick. A Ford Transit is a size of a van. It looks like a size of a van just as it drives by, but it complies on both. And then I just have a number of things that I looked through, and I'm finding all of these things that would comply or not comply. So I think that without with the specification, if we don't have a measurement method to assess what we're looking at, how do we know if we have been successful or not? If we don't have a way to measure this, or we don't have a way to enforce it.
Thank you, Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yeah, I was just going to answer your questions. My recollection that we've had 2 complaints, both from Ward 7, one from a resident and one from a former council member.
And my recollection is that they wanted to park their vehicles that were commercial on the street, and that was not allowed. Is that your recollection?
That was the complaint of the council person.
Yeah.
The other resident did not want any wrapped or identifiable commercial vehicles in.
Right. I recollect that. Councilmember Edens?
I was just going to say something very similar. Councilmember McCutcheon just said there were, from what I remember, was at least 2 other council members involved in this discussion. And at the time, I didn't vote in favor of moving this forward. The pictorial chart was very helpful before, but there were some oddities, including weight classes, especially with delivery vans that are shaped differently, like Amazon Prime, for example. But just in terms of general background information, what I remember from the departmental discussion and the director's discussion was that the city's position before had been that, that workplaces have been steadily shifting responsibility for these vehicles onto their employees rather than providing a place for them to park and leave their vehicle, and that it was not the responsibility of the city to make up for that shifting and burden. And I think that, would you agree that that summarized the discussion a couple of years ago? Yeah, and also part of the discussion at the time was trailers as well. So what happens if, let's say it's a commercial trailer for yard and lawn mowing equipment as a business, but it's not an excessively large pickup truck that's pulling the attachment with the trailer that doesn't have advertisements and the truck does, because and these are real life examples that have happened in neighborhoods in my ward. So I don't want to really waste the department's time. I don't have a huge objection to a trial period, but that doesn't mean I'm going to support a change. My one question is, in terms of the thought process is, can we actually expect a net change of activity during a trial period? Because if people don't know that something's not being enforced, or that there is a potential code change in the future, they may not start bringing home or leaving out vehicles they haven't done before. So you might not get an occurrence of issues. Whereas as soon as it's a public hearing or a notice or the law changes and it's in the paper, then you may have more individuals bringing those vehicles and leaving them out, and they weren't captured in any sort of data collection with a complaint period. So that's my only concern is how are we going to know that it's statistically accurate in the complaint period?
I've got a potential solution, but before I submit that to the council for consideration, Councilmember Brost, you were next, and then Director Vintage wants to make some comments.
Yeah, I guess it's just, my one question would be, is it mentions that, kept or stored on a roadway or highway in a residential district. Would a residential district be everything other than the commercial district? That would be a question. I mean, Joe?
Mr. Brost, yes, any R district and including the non-urban resident district. So the only ones that would not be included would be the commercial and industrial. Thank you.
Yeah, so, I mean, not to say that I have a camper and not to say that I might hook it to my truck the night before I leave, but I could be in violation of this then too. I mean, my truck is borderline based on payload, and I would definitely be violating it once I hook my trailer. So I think, yeah, that's just my thought. I mean, I think there's situations that, there's a good to this, but then we don't want it to be burdensome either for the convenience of our residents. So, thank you.
Director Vintage, did you want to say something at this point?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could, to Ms. Clark's comments, The issue of the different vehicular weights and how they're classified was something that the committee covered at, I think, at least 2 of its meetings. And certainly the definition tonight is the one that the committee settled upon. It was not something that was generated solely by the Department of Planning. It was a collective effort over the course of many discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to throw this out just for consideration as an option. Now, I'm mentioning this because it sounds like, well, I think it is in fact the case that we have not had any resident complaints about the status quo at the moment. You may recall the council passed resolution 2020-11. It authorizes for COVID purposes, which that was the genesis, according to Mr. Vintage, of the suspension of ordinances to allow for example, our restaurants to have space on the sidewalks and so forth. That could be used for this. So what I would submit to the council as a potential option is, since we don't have resident complaints about this, if we start to have those, then we could use that as an already built-in mechanism to handle the situation and potentially make those changes, the suspension of those ordinances or the alteration of those ordinances a permanent fixture in the city. I guess I'm just reticent to start changing things if there's not anything that's coming to the forefront on the part of our residents wanting that done. So that's an option I'm going to throw out. I don't know what your feeling is for it, but if that's the case, I don't know that there would be any action needed because it's already a built-in mechanism. Is that correct, City Attorney Young?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Councilmember Garitano, you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you just said, I'm in full agreement of. I would be very hesitant to try to open up sort of a Pandora's box if we really don't have the reason to do it. And I think, our city is very unique. We have areas of our city where there are people that perhaps have long driveways, all out of sight or out of the road, but like my perspective in the area that I live in, these driveways are very small, so you could see every vehicle if it's parked in the driveway. And my greatest concern is that, getting into really the commercial, the wrap vehicles, where you really start to get into quality of life issues. You start to see things like that obstructing. And I've heard that. There was an example in Crown Point Estates of a vehicle that had a full wrap all around it, commercial use. And it was resulted in several complaints. It was unsightly. I think that issue resolved itself. That vehicle is no longer there. But that's why I would be very hesitant if we're going to go just based off of weight. I would want to make sure that things like the wrapping and the commercial, especially for those areas where people can see everything on the road, are considered. So your point, I would not want to change anything at this time.
Thank you. So is there any objection or alternative proposal from any member of the council? I'm sorry, that wasn't worded well. Is there any objection on the part of any member of the council to having this handled, at least for the foreseeable future, under Emergency Resolution 2020-11, since COVID was the genesis of this, and kind of see where it goes? And if that doesn't seem to solve the problem, if we start getting complaints, then have this discussion. Is there any objection to that? No objection. Anyone virtually with us? No objection. Okay, so with that, and again, for the city attorney, we don't need a motion. We'll just handle it that way. And as I do on anything pertaining to that emergency resolution, if something comes about, I would advise the council before acting on that. All right. That takes care of that. Next on the issue then, or on the agenda then, is the consultant proposal for the engineering plan for Village Green. This concerns Ward 8. And Mr. Vinich, would you be the one to speak to this? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Parks Committee is presenting to City Council tonight a recommendation regarding a professional services contract with Human Nature and an engineering firm locally headquartered here in St. Louis. The intent of the recommendation is to authorize a contract to proceed forward with the design, engineering, and bid specifications and plans for Village Green Phase 1. As you know, Village Green has a number of different phases associated with it due to cost. Phase 1 is the intent of the city to open the property up for utilization at the least amount of cost possible. Phase 1, however, does have a $1.6 million cost associated with it. The city council has set aside in 2023, $700,000 for the work. The Department of Planning and Parks is seeking 2 grants that would total over $1 million to make up the deficit or the gap. The city council set aside this year $200,000 for the design, engineering, and bid specification and plan process. The proposal before you tonight is less than that amount at $192,000. And again, the committee is recommending that the city council consider such favorably and authorize legislation for the professional services contract at the next available meeting. Thank you.
So Joe, specifically, and this is probably somewhere in your report, but for ease of reference for the public and the council, if the council approves the legislation is requested tonight, the preparation of legislation, can you please let everyone know the total expenditure that will result from that legislation and how that will be sequentially paid if it will not be paid at once?
The total expense for the contract is $192,000. In the capital improvements program for 2022, there is money set aside for that exact purpose at $200,000. So the amount of contract is less than the amount budgeted.
Okay, excellent. And then what happened to our budget line items that we were including here? We weren't putting them on work session. Okay. Let's start, if there's no objection, let's start putting those on the work session too. So I think you've been doing it correctly up to this point because we're only talking about council agenda, full meeting agendas, or main meeting agendas, but I think it would be helpful for the council and the public to know what these things are relative. Is there any objection to doing that? Having the budgetary line items with work session as well? Okay, so we'll do that. Minor point. All right. So any questions for Joe, or does someone want to make a motion? Councilmember Edens.
I do have a question. So from the schematics, I can see that you've got the terrace and the location of the future pavilion. My only question is if we wanted to spend a little bit more now out of our own pocket on a pavilion that had more of that wired for sound aspect, because we had talked about, and events in the future, we wouldn't have the consistent cost of incurring a stage rental, which we bring in, right? So let's say we get a grant in 2023, that would put construction spring of 2024, potentially, because this is not a huge development, could be ready for, let's say, September of 2024, but we're still incurring those costs of stage rentals, running sound, et cetera. And we'll continue to do that for the next couple of event seasons until we would decide to spend more money or move on to phase 2 or phase 3. Would it not make sense to go ahead and bite the bullet on that and include that in phase 1?
What would the cost of that be if someone could tell us that, you or Mr. Vinich, either one, to add the additional cost? What would that additional cost be?
Well, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, the pavilion, at least in terms of overall improvements, is one of the more expensive items. I think the question is more so, would we be agreeable to increasing the consultant contract so that the design and engineering of the pavilion can be included? Then we could do it as an ad alternate. And as an ad alternate, if the bids come in below expectation, then we could do it. If they come in higher or at what we believe, then we would have the option of considering not to do it. But I think the contract for the professional services would probably need to be increased to accommodate that additional work.
And to follow up on Councilor Eaton's question, is it your position that if the council wanted to add that in, that it needs to be done before this initial expenditure for this scope of work is approved, or could this be approved and that be brought back as a separate agreement? Does it need to be in one, or can it be in two?
Actually, I think it can be in two if we want to get underway, and then I can negotiate then with Human Nature and the local engineering firm, CDI, and see what that cost would be, but at least we could get the legislation started.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and make the motion that we move forward with the department's recommendation. And I'm kind of going on the same path that you were going on, Mr. Mayor, is, we can, in the meantime, ask them what would it cost to include this part. They can bring that back. If we want to move forward with that, we can, but let's get this other part moving forward first. I think is a best idea today.
We have a first. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. City Administrator Cross, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you. Regarding ongoing costs to erect the stage and for the lighting, or I'm sorry, for the sound, for each of the concerts, that might run $3,500 between the two. And that is an operating expense, not a capital expense. So, which is already built into the budget on the operating side of the budget. So just wanted to point that out as you're deliberating what you want to do with this.
Okay, thank you. So if this passes, if the motion, this being the motion, then the legislation for the 192,000 and change consultant agreement would come back as legislation, a bill for the council to approve. In my understanding, the read of the council that I'm getting, if there's no objection, is possibly at the next council meeting or the one thereafter, whenever it can be done, our director of planning will get a bid from the same vendor for accomplishing the pavilion from an engineering perspective, and the council can decide on that separately. Is everyone good with that? Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion that's on the floor? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So the council will see that bill presumably at the next meeting. Next, we have on the agenda discussion with Waste Connections. Their contract is coming up later this year, and I know that our Administration Public Works Committee of the council has been engaged in discussions with them. We have two representatives from Waste Connections with us this evening. Thank you so much for being here. So this is a point where we can hear from them and ask questions. And if there's no objection, I thought I would start. If either of you have anything you want to say, please come to the podium and say that. Otherwise, we'll start right in with questions. So that too, we're going to get you there either way.
Fire away.
Okay, so no introductory remarks?
Sorry, I'll introduce myself. I'm Rob Gill, District Manager. This is Linda Jones, Sales Supervisor for the company out of St. Louis.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we have the representatives with us. Thank you again for being here. And how many years are we into this? Three?
Yep, we're just finished. We're starting our third. August was 3. August was 2. Sorry, we're in our third.
Exactly.
Right.
All right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Waste Connections or any comments? Councilmember Edens.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So I'm in Ward 2 along with Councilmember Bartoni. So we're the Northeast quadrant, and I remember you, Linda, from before. And I'm not having some of the same issues that other wards are having. I think it's because we have our pickups earlier in the week, perhaps, and maybe as things slow down, we're not as, maybe we get everybody else behind, I suppose. But I have had areas with repetitive missed pickups, and so they have been reported, and usually you have given a follow-up that you will pick up, the following day. But that's happened a few times where there's been no additional pickup. And this is not inclusive of snowstorms or anything like that. So my question is when you have entire subdivisions that are missed, and maybe it's a relief driver, do you automatically know, like, does the driver report to you at the end of the day that they didn't complete their route, or are you waiting on a resident to kind of complain to even know about an issue?
That it depends, honestly. If it's a newer driver that doesn't even know that he or she missed the area, then he or she has nothing to report, and we would depend on a resident or Steve or Michelle to let us know.
Okay, so I'm wondering if that's where the breakdown is, if it's maybe if a driver isn't aware that they're assigned to come back and pick up or pick up in the first place, and then where the gap is in that follow-up. So that would be my thought. I don't know if there's a better way to get out in front of it if it is a relief driver, or if there's a better way to communicate and follow up with your drivers. But it's not a huge problem on my ward, but it has been a change and since the last year. So thank you.
And I'll just say, one of the things we are looking to do is updating the maps. They haven't been updated since we started the contract. We've done some routing shifts, just dependent on the driver's ability. So that is on the docket for our radar.
And to follow up on that question, it might be beneficial for our residents who watch this to know, just in general, when you're alerted to a missed pickup, and invariably that's going to happen in a city of our size. I think we would all agree with that. And we have a dedicated person here at City Hall that centralized, from a centralized processing standpoint, collects all the complaints, issues, and it's worked well, I think, communicating those to you. But the question I have, mainly for the benefit of our residents, when you're made aware of a missed pickup, could you just briefly sort of walk through how you handle that so that our residents know how that's done?
Yes, sir. So let's say a complaint comes in at 11, 12 o'clock that day. I alert the ops supervisor. He lets me know exactly who's out in that area. And that person has to report back to the ops supervisor with resolution to the pickup. If the complaint comes through at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, then we have to see if we do have a truck out there, and if it's feasible to get. If it's not feasible to get, we typically reach out to the customer or Mr. Cross or Michelle and let them know that we'll have to get that tomorrow.
Okay.
Or the next day, sorry.
And if I could just in follow up, in general, on a statistical basis, are missed pickups handled on the same day or the next day percentage wise? Can you give us the rundown on that?
It really depends on what time it comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we don't want our trucks on your streets when it's dark and right. So it really depends. Unfortunately, I think it's a kind of a gray area as to when it comes in and if we have trucks in that area.
Okay, so can you break it down? If they come in by noon, they get picked up that day. If it's afternoon, it's usually the next day or 2 days. I mean, I'm just looking for something general.
Yeah, in general, I would say at least 75% are the moment we get the notice, we send it out. There's a 25% that is right there that we're like, well, we don't have a truck in the area, or we're all wrapped up for the day. We're going to have to get it the next day.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Garetano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gill and Ms. Jones, you may remember me, or at least Ms. Jones, you will remember me. I'm chair of the Admin Public Works Committee, and we handled the process of selecting the waste collection vendor for Wildwood a while back. So I've got a couple of questions for you. So you might want to jot these down, and that way you can respond to them. So one pain point that I've had is that the communication from Waste Connections, and by communication, I mean the app notification, the robocalling, is not being utilized, with probably the only exception, the most recent snowstorm. And the past several weeks, basically since Thanksgiving through up to now, in my ward, Ward 8, which is a town center area, so you're in Ward 8, I've had an almost weekly basis complaints from residents, which I've forwarded to Mr. Cross and Mr. Brown to send to you, which you probably have seen my emails. And one of the biggest complaints I get from people is there's no notification. Is the trash going to be picked up? Is it being delayed by a day? And therefore, why aren't you utilizing the robocall system, the app notifications? Again, with the exception of the recent snowstorm, because you did use it then. So that's my first question. I'll let you answer that, in order. My other question number 2, pertains to when you were before us seeking the contract, I remember, and I vividly remember this was one of the great selling points of Waste Connections, was that you said, Ms. Jones, I remember you saying this because I even asked you, that you had a call center open on Saturdays from 7 to 10. And the reason I say this is because it means a lot to me, because my area has the Friday collection day. And when collections are missed, that Saturday means something to me. However, a resident recently notified me that they called on Saturday and received a recording. And in follow-up conversation with Mr. Cross, Ms. Jones, you said you never did this before. And so that's a concern I have, because that's something that is a contractual obligation that's not being met, according to what I've learned. So I'd like to understand this second item. What happened? Why did it stop? And what are you going to do to meet your obligation? And then the third is along the lines of what Ms. Eden said, just a complaint about the missed collections that all of a sudden, since basically the time of November, have occurred. And what are you going to do in order to get the system back up and working, so I don't have to get calls or notifications and have to forward them to Mr. Cross, then who has to send them on to you? I think our city staff should be utilizing their time for more important business. And, you know, right now the service is completely unacceptable. You've lost my support. And so I'm very interested in hearing what your response is to these three questions.
Thank you. You want to answer those?
Yes, sir. I'll take the first one, since the second one was more related to the history of the contract. We have typically found it necessary to send a call blast out or update the app when there's more of a delay in service than we expect. By saying that, I mean, when we have a miss or a missed subdivision that we know of on our end, we typically send the trucks out very first thing in the morning and pick the trash up right at 7 a.m. If there's more of a delay than that 7 a.m. first thing in the morning, then we do update our app and send the call blast out. If there's not more of a delay, which we can change on our end, it's no big deal. We do not send out notification. We just pick it up before most residents are out the door.
Yeah, the other thing that we're doing is we have the maps. And when there's an area that's not fully finished, I send the maps to city staff so they know they can get it to you guys. So if there's something going on in your ward, you can see what area is affected. So we try to communicate that. That was kind of something new. We started maybe about 6 months ago. And I think Rick and Michelle really liked that, because then if they got a call from Shiloh Woods Road and they had the map in front of them, they could be like, oh, yes, but to keep it out, we'll be back there. They're coming back. They notified us. They were proactive. So that's something else we've kind of started about 6 months, I think.
So in follow-up to that, what is your preferred method of communication of, you know, bad weather, delayed pickup? You know, we got notice that, you know, we had a missed pickup at your residence. Is it text? Is it email? Is it phone? Or what is it?
It would be through our app. The app, the Waste Connect app, we can update on the fly if things are up or down. It's automatic. It's not a call that someone has to answer or call back to get a message.
And an individual resident can get their delayed pickup time from that app. Is that correct? Okay. Have we publicized that?
Yeah, city staff's done a really.
I'm
good
talking
job
like
of
in
it.
our Gazette and the app and everything. Okay.
Yeah, it's on social media and, but I mean, the question is, what's the best way? I mean, when there's something, snowstorm, or we're not finishing something, I mean, there's all kinds of communication going on between city staff and us. And then we'll do a call blast, or we'll let them know, or we'll work on the wording of a call blast with the.
When you say call blast, is that something on your app or is that different?
It's different. It's we use our program to download everyone's number.
Okay, so that's what I was asking.
Yep.
Right there. So is that to be done by a text or is that done by phone?
That's
Like a
done by
message?
phone, sir.
And we have
Mr.
And do we
Mayor, can I-
publicize? I'm sorry, Councilor Gaetano.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, I mean, as I mentioned, I've experienced almost weekly complaints from residents, and usually we're talking about neighborhoods at a time, like Main Street Crossing, enclaves, et cetera, or significant portions of neighborhoods. But since November, the only time that I am aware that we have gotten a robocall was just with the recent snowstorm that occurred about a week or so ago. So the app or the robocalls that automatically go out are not being utilized for these areas that do get missed pickups, which result in us getting inundated with complaints and calls that we don't even have the answer to when the pickup's going to be. And I know I heard there was a mention of maps being provided with Rick. I would defer to Mr. Cross and Mr. Brown, but I'm not gotten a response when I forwarded a complaint that the city was already aware of it and they knew when it would pick up. In almost every case, those have been forwarded over to Waste Connections. So I'd be curious if Rick or Steve could comment on that. Is this information you had all this time and we didn't know about?
Do you want to comment on that at all? What is your specific question, Councilor Gaetano?
The gentleman from Waste Connections said that they are notifying Rick, and I'm not sure who else at the staff here at City Hall, that of when there are issues, when there are impacts. I don't think that's happening. I'm not aware of it because every time I have forwarded a complaint, it has had to go to Waste Connections to be addressed. So I'd like to understand, is this really happening or not? Are there instances that Rick has had those maps?
City Administrator Cross?
Councilman Gaetano, it is happening now. It has been sporadic in the past. Just today, Ms. Jones forwarded a map to Rick and I with regards to the areas in Ward 1 and Ward 6 that were missed today. I forwarded that to the council members for those two wards, but that is something that's new. I don't think it's been going on for 6 months. I think it's quite a bit shorter than that, but that process is in place. And it's a relatively recent process whereby we're being notified, but I think that is primarily because we've been keeping the heat on lately because of the degradation in the service that we're getting from Waste Connections. I will make note to the council members that I was recently made aware that there's a section in the contract that calls for penalties to Waste Connections, and I was unaware of that. I had a conversation with the city attorney today with regards to implementing those penalties to Waste Connections. That will begin immediately. And those are significant penalties whereby the city bills Waste Connections. And we will go back and bill for past grievances that we can fully document, and we will go forward with that. So there's penalties that we have not assessed to Waste Connections, but we will make that effective, including retroactive. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilor Bartoni?
Thank you. I'm probably pretty fortunate because the subdivision I'm in, very seldom we have a missed pickup, so I think we probably have some anomalies out there, and probably some people feel like they're getting picked on for sure. But I know when Councilmember Edens and I have an HOA meeting or anytime we're meeting with residents, we always mention your app. I think your app is great. I mean, I don't use it probably very often, but when it was snowing and I was checking it every night, and that's when I was like, nope, they're not coming tomorrow. They'll be here Friday. And, you kind of got some good information. So Maybe if you know that you missed a subdivision, maybe something can be put out on that app, like, hey, we missed Strecker Farms, we missed Carriage, and and we'll be there tomorrow morning. Cause like, I know as a person, that's the type of stuff I look at night. I'm not gonna look at it at 7 o'clock in the morning. My day's already started. At night, I'm looking at those things and maybe I can look, yep, they know they missed it. They'll be here tomorrow. So maybe that's something you can do just to kind of help the residents. And I know we've had this on our, on the weekly e-news. I remember seeing information out there about the app. It's not out there now. Maybe we can just put it back out there and just refresh people's memory that the app is out there. Because I think the information that you guys do provide is good. And, I mean, we all know, I'm sure you've had staffing issues. I'm sure that's probably been a couple of the days that people have missed. I think everybody's empathetic to that, but at the same time, they just kind of want to know what's going on. Maybe people are just feeling like they're forgotten, and just a little bit, maybe proactive information and message could help out a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, council members, we're getting close to the start of our needing to start our meeting, and we've got 3 council members on the list here. So we'll go next. Council member Rambo, if you have anything new to add or any new questions.
Yes, I'll be real quick. I had a couple of comments, but I will save those. I did have at least one resident recently and a couple more in the past who asked about credits. And Mr. Cross found that that handy provision in the contract to bill back Waste Connections for missed pickups. I'm wondering if there's any sort of facility or system for credit to folks for missed pickups. I know it's only like $1 or something, but if the question's being asked, then we need to have an answer.
And is that in the contract as well, City Attorney Young? Credits to residents?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. So the question is that possible to do?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Typically, when a customer calls in on a miss and they ask for a credit, then there's virtually no pushback.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we-
Okay, so that wasn't this resident's experience. Most recently, it was last week, but I will follow up with her and I'll be prepared in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Roast?
I'd just like to say I appreciate when your driver empties my trash. The can's always rotated, and it's great. Because when I can look out, oh, they've been here. So
Thank you.
I don't know if that's a policy throughout or just my driver, but I do appreciate it. So thank you.
We'll take it.
All right, excellent. Councilmember Garetano, did you want to say anything further? I saw your hand a moment ago, but I don't see it now.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I only am following up on just the 2 questions that I asked before that I didn't get a response to regarding the call center on Saturday. And then just to hear from Waste Connections, what's your plan to get back on track? So, Mr. Mayor, I'll let you determine if you want to give them a minute or 2 to respond to that, or want to get the response a different way.
Okay, sure, thank you. Anything further you want to respond to Councilor Garetano's comment?
So the call center, we did discuss that when we were doing, negotiations and throwing things out there. It was not incorporated into the contract. Correct me, am I wrong, Mr. Young? Well, it's okay. It's not. But when we set that up, the call center on Saturdays. Is it in the contract?
Yes, in fact, Rob.
Need to turn the mic on.
I'm sorry. When I had the discussion with Rob, and Rob, I'm sure you'll support this. When I brought it to your attention, you said that you all had stopped doing that for business purposes. And when I said you can't do that because it's in the contract, you said, okay, I will reinstate it effective immediately.
Yeah,
Correct.
it is something we did talk about, Mr. Cross, and I talked to Linda. And this is all previous to me, and my knowledge is the calls that come in on a Saturday would be, 5 to 10. And if we felt as a company and working with you guys as a city, it was not necessary that we would stop the Saturday call center. We can reinstate it and kind of judge it off of call volume and go from there.
Which is what I thought you were going to do and so forth.
Yep.
Is that being done now and you're evaluating Is it open and you're evaluating the number of calls as you said? you were
Since
going
we
to?
last talked, we had the big issues. We were there on Saturdays anyway. So once we get back to business as normal and get out of the snowstorm area, then yes, we will reinstate this.
Councilor Dodwell, anything new? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here and thank you for the service that you provide to our residents. We appreciate it. And I know
Thank
they
you.
do too.
Thanks for having
All
us.
right. Okay, councilors, we have one item left on the agenda, which is an executive session, but as I've mentioned previously, when this was on the agenda, it's one of those items that I think is important that we have unanimity in the attendance. And so if there's no objection, I know, but we need to have majority, we need to have full people there for that. So we do need to get the item handled that is the subject of the executive session. So hopefully at the next council meeting, we could have all 16. If I know we have illnesses and things that we can't help and travel plans and schedules and we have 16. Which is larger than most. So it is what it is. But if we could, if there's no objection, I'd like to move this to the executive session to the next council meeting, or I'm sorry, to the work session of the council, so that we can have it then and hopefully have 16 of us or 16 of you and me at that meeting. Is there any objection to moving it to that point? All right, so that's what we'll do by consensus. That takes us to, I don't think we have anything under miscellaneous. We have a receipt and file. I'm sorry, Councilor Bartone.
Oh, just a comment on the closed session, like for the committee meetings, we're not in person, but we're still able to have them. And I'm not trying to change it today, but hopefully we will have 16 people here.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe there's just a way that we can work them out.
We have to have them in person, I believe, for the executive session. Is that correct, City Attorney Young?
On something like this, we're relating to litigation, I would much prefer it be in person.
Okay, fair enough.
Nice try, though. Oh, I appreciate it. All right. Next item is PZ 27-21, a receipt and file. Mr. Bennett, you want to speak to that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has provided you a letter of recommendation that grants to the applicant a solar energy system on the rear portion of their dwelling. Given the rear portion of the dwelling is visible from Taylor Road, a conditional use permit was required. The Planning and Zoning Commission granted the permit, which allows up to 21 panels on the rear portion of the dwelling. As with any conditional use permit, the City Council has up to 15 days to exercise its power of review after receipt and filing of the letter of recommendation. Therefore, tonight you have received and filed the report and you have 15 days to exercise power of review. If there are any questions regarding the action of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department would be glad to try to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. This concerns Ward 5. Any, as indicated on the agenda, any questions from any member of the council or comments on the receipt file? All right, seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the work session. Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. Non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Councilor Rambo, were you voting to adjourn?
I said, aye, I'm sorry, my thumb messed up.
That's okay. So you are in favor of adjournment, correct? Okay, perfect. All right. Any no votes? Any abstentions? So we are adjourned. Let's take a 3-minute break and we'll start the main meeting of the council. Thank you. Why do we have everything with like hand? All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, February 14, 2022. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bullen,
Here?
Councilmember Galani,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Jaxi,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino, Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Roast,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Here,
Councilmember Flasher, Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Okay, thank you and welcome everyone, and particularly those who are with us this evening in the audience. For those who are comfortably able, if you would please stand with me for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the January 24, 2022 work session and regular meeting. And by the way, to each of you, I missed you not being here for that one. So are there any comments or questions on the minutes? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Made by Councilmember Ottenberg, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes as presented? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Councilmember Rambo has his hand up.
I just wanted to say that I had a problem with my mute button and I was actually here when the roll was called. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any objection to the motion? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Moving next to public participation, do we have any speaker cards this evening? Travis, do we have anyone online who has indicated they want to speak with a raised hand? All right. Moving along under mayor announcements and appointments, we do have one appointment. It's on the consent agenda. It's actually a reappointment to our Historic Preservation Commission. We'll come to that momentarily. Public hearings, PZ 23 and 23A-21 Westridge Commons. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
PZ 23 and 23A-21 Westridge Commons, McBride Barrow Land Company LLC, care of Jeannie M. Allmiller, 17415 North Outer 40 Road, Chesterfield, Missouri 63005. A request for a modification from the workplace district designation of the Town Center Regulating Plan to the Neighborhood General District on a 2.51 acre tract of land consisting of 5 lots of record, all being located on the north and south sides of New College Avenue between State Route 109 and West Avenue. Street addresses 17001, 17002, 17005, 17006, and 17010 New College Avenue, St. Louis County, locator numbers 24V420362, 24V420351, 24V420313, 24V420340, and 24V420331. Accompanying the aforementioned regulating plan modification is a request for a change in zoning from the amended C8 Planned Commercial District PZ 14-01 McLean Partners to the R6A 4,000 square foot residence district with the planned residential development overlay district PRD for the same tract of land. These requests seek to modify the use of the subject tract of land from its current vacant and undeveloped commercial status to a residential type of use. Proposed use, a total of 18 attached single-family dwellings on individual lots of record with common ground and required public space areas.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything you want to mention relative to this public hearing item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, very briefly. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has provided for your consideration tonight its letter of recommendation regarding the matters that were just read into the record by the city clerk. There are three components to this particular project. The first is a change in the regulating plan of Town Center from Workplace District to Neighborhood General District to accommodate a residential utilization of the 2+ acre site versus commercial. Commercial in this case was office warehouse. Secondly, the intent of the request is to allow a rezoning from the C8 plan commercial district to a residential district, and then the application, the third and final component of the planned residential development overlay district. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered four major components in its discussion and analysis of this particular set of requests, and ultimately agreed that the type of use was appropriate at this location and would serve as a good transition between commercial and more established detached single-family residential areas. Also, along with that discussion on that particular item, the Planning and Zoning Commission did note that the new urbanism requirements associated with design and architecture were applicable here, and that the units themselves were good examples of such. Tonight, the department is presenting the letter of recommendation in its final form. At the conclusion of public comments, the department will be respectfully requesting authorization to prepare the necessary legislation. I would also note in conclusion that two representatives from McBride Homes, the applicant, are here tonight and available for any questions if the city council should need. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any speaker cards for this public hearing? Travis, has anyone raised hand? Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Vinich? If not, does someone want to make a motion? Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, I just had a question on the front elevation. So the way it displays on my iPad, and I did go through this before, but unless I missed it, I'm seeing the rear entry with the garage on page 27 and 28. I was just wondering if the department had a picture of what the front elevation would look like with the front doors and the sidewalk in front of it, just so I can get a better idea of the feel of the design.
Ms. Edens, I believe the petitioner provided such as part of their presentation at public hearing. I'd have to defer to Mr. Newberry to see if we can pull that up. If not, we'll certainly have it if legislation is authorized so that you can see it before the bill is discussed.
Yeah, that would be great. I think anybody in the public that's interested in commenting in the future would like to see it, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we'll have that then, as he indicated, if the motion is made and passed, to have legislation prepared at that point. Councilmember Dodwell.
I'm a little concerned because this looks to me, without that front elevation, to be housing in an eastern block somewhere. I don't know. So you're asking us to make a decision on whether we move things forward, and we really don't have a good look at the design. Joe, is there any way that you could possibly grab something off of your computer or the petitioner if they're listening, so that we could see what this is going to look like on the other side before we vote on this? I know, Mr. Mayor, you want to get this meeting done fast, but
No, we'll do what we got to do to get it done. Travis indicated he might be able to do that.
And then I had one more question.
Why don't you go ahead with that while he's doing that?
The roadway, I was having a hard time telling from the drawings, and I'm not an expert on these drawings. Are these garage entrances facing the backside of homes on the other side of them, or are they facing the inside of this whole group of homes? Just curious as to whether this is what the neighbors are going to be looking at going forward.
Mr. Vinich, do you want to answer that while Travis is trying to find an elevation for us?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dodwell, the intent is to have the garage entry areas facing to the north, which is West County Feed Store, so a commercial project. And then those that face to the south, and that's south of New College Avenue, abut a large lot, single family subdivision of 2 lots. And the intent is to screen that area with landscaping and the existing tree line to the south. So commercial to the north and 2 lots, one of which is not developed, to the south.
Thank you.
And I'm not sure if Mr. There. Thank you, Mr. Newberry.
Okay.
And so to follow up on the questions of Councilmember Edens and Dodwell, this view, i.e. the front, will be seen where? In what direction is this exposure going to be?
In both instances, on the north and south side, it will be toward New College Avenue.
Okay. And again, the garage entries will be where, Joe? On the north and the south, you said?
To the rear of the dwelling's front. And in the instance of north of New College Avenue, you'll see the garages from West County Feed. And to the south of New College Avenue, you'll see it from the adjoining 3-acre lot that has a single family dwelling. However, due to elevation and existing tree line and landscaping, I believe that the amount of visibility will be very limited.
And is the siding going to be hardy board or vinyl?
The intent is to have the same requirements as we stipulate for any single family detached dwelling, and that's hardy board, architectural shingles, special types of garage doors, and when there's brick used, to turn the corner on the brick and not end it at like it's shown on the image.
And thank you for that. And my recollection is from the Planning and Zoning Commission that there was discussion about making sure that these are homogeneous with the Westridge Center buildings. And so I'm assuming when it gets into brick selection, for example, that the masonry, that we would want to have the masonry look, the color and so forth to be as fairly similar to that, would we not? To what, because those buildings in Westridge are full masonry and will be very close to this. So is that not the case?
Yes, in the conditions, we talked about consistency with the built environment where this particular project is to be situated.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? And thank you, Travis, for finding. You have a good memory as to where these things are.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Okay, a motion or yes, Councilor Edens.
Yeah, sorry, I just have a quick question. So I thought because of page 16 with the strike through that they would be vinyl until you just describe what type of board, Mr. Vunich. So am I reading it wrong? Because if we marked out accepting no vinyl siding shall be allowed on any dwelling unit, etc., doesn't that mean they're allowed to use vinyl as a material and wouldn't have to go back and seek additional approval and could just substitute a change? It's under G. Page 16, right before plan submittal requirements. It makes sense that the vinyl siding of comparable quality has a strike through. But I don't understand why we took it out the first time.
Let's let him.
And pardon me while I find it. I apologize for the delay.
That's okay.
Yes, it is page 16. So there's the small 16 on the bottom of the scan document, and then 16 the way it's displaying in the red or the browser.
I think he's got it.
Oh, sorry.
So I would just reference the next sentence after the strike through. All materials used on any facade of a residential unit shall be fiber cement siding with backer board, wood, stone, or brick. So We took out all references to vinyl and just highlighted what can be used, not what necessarily couldn't.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. It makes a lot more sense now. Apologies.
Thank
Thank you.
Anyone want to make a motion? Councilor Maglani? The motion, if you were in favor of this, would be to have legislation prepared for presentation to the council as recommended by the department. Yes. Seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving next, public hearing item PZ 29-21 concerning 1045 Babbler Park Drive. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
PZ 29-21, 1045 Babbler Park Drive, care of David Spitznagel, 1045 Babbler Park Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63005. A request for a change in zoning from the FPPS floodplain Parks and Scenic District and PS Park and Scenic District to the FPNU floodplain non-urban residence district and NU non-urban residence district upon a parcel of ground that is 6.53 acres in size, which is located on the west side of Babbler Park Drive, State Route BA, north of its intersection with Pond Road. The property was previously part of Babbler State Park, but was sold into private ownership by the state of Missouri. Such sale, and now the property is used for residential purposes, necessitates the request for zoning change.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Benish, anything you want to mention further relative to this particular public hearing item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just a few items. The Planning and Zoning Commission has provided for City Council's consideration its letter of recommendation regarding the requested change in zoning. As is mentioned in the advertisement read by the city clerk, this particular property used to be part of Babbler State Park, was sold into private ownership sometime in the 1970s, and the zoning was never changed. With the Park and Scenic zoning, the expansion of the existing single-family residential dwelling cannot be accommodated because it is prohibited under the zoning district designation at this time. Therefore, the property owner has requested a change to a true residential district, a non-urban, and the Planning and Zoning Commission endorsed such change and is recommending such to City Council. I would note that at the conclusion of public comments, the department will be respectfully requesting legislation to accommodate the change in zoning. And Mr. Spitznagel is on tonight if there are any questions of him.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any speaker cards for this item? Madam Clerk? No. Travis, do we have any member of the public that has raised their hand to speak on this? All right. Any questions for Mr. Vintage? This concerns Ward 1. If not, I would ask for a motion if anyone's interested in making it. Councilmember Clark?
Yes, I'll make that motion to proceed as advised by the department.
Okay, and that would be for the preparation of legislation, correct, Mr. Vintage?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Brost. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to proceed to have legislation prepared relative to PZ 29-21, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. That takes us into legislation. The first is Bill 20 for second reading. Bill 2667 is before the council. It concerns Ward 1 as well. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Brost, seconded by Councilmember Clark. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Elders, please read Bill 2667.
Bill 2667, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute the attached deed, exhibit, and other documentation, which will thereby grant a 200 square foot easement onto a public property to the Union Electric Company doing business as Hammond, Missouri, which is to be located on a portion of Cone Park abutting South Etherton Road to accommodate the relocation of a utility pole that has become a traffic hazard. Second reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything further you want to mention relative to Bill 2667?
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the bill and its content has not changed. There was a question at the last meeting regarding just how many trees or tree removal occurred to accommodate the relocation. I did provide a photograph to Ms. Clark, who asked the question. I do have the photograph if the other city council members would like to see it.
Sure.
And again, the photograph was taken today, and as you can see, the pole has been relocated slightly off the edge of the driving surface, not much. The majority of the easement area is necessary for the guide wires that are on the back side of the pole. The assessment on the part of the department was that other than some ground vegetation, no trees were removed.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2667.
Councilmember Galani,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Odenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
yes,
Councilmember Garitano.
Yes.
We have to see your face, I think. Yes, we do.
Councilor Garitano,
Yes.
we need. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
All right, the bill passes and is now in effect. Next, we have Bill 2668. This is before the council. It concerns Ward 6. There is a request from the department to have this postponed. Would anyone like to make a motion to postpone to the next meeting of the council, Bill 2668? Made by Councilmember Jaxi, seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Any discussion on the motion to postpone? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion to postpone to the next council meeting, Bill 2668, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that takes us to first readings, the first of which is Bill 2669. It concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2669.
Bill 2669, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a minor subdivision plat of a 10-acre property that is located within the Shiloh subdivision, Shiloh Oaks Lane, which would thereby create 3 lots, all being within fractional survey section 33, township 45 north, range 3 east, with no parcel of ground less than 3 acres in size, and now known hereafter as the JGH subdivision. First reading.
Thank you. Mr. Vince, do you have anything further you want to mention to the council?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, I do not. Mr. Newberry has provided you a colorized version of the plat. As you can see, there are 3 lots proposed on the 10-acre parent parcel of ground. I would note that Mr. Hill, the owner of property, is on as an attendee if there are any questions for him. Thank you.
And Joe, did we have a request for a second reading on this?
I did not talk to Mr. Hill about a second reading, so I would have to defer to him. But certainly all the items that are necessary to complete the process are available and have been submitted.
Well, I saw something about a second reading on one. Oh, okay, which we can't do at this point. Right. Okay. Thank you, Travis. All right. Would there be any objection, Joe, to doing a second reading to facilitate the resident with this?
Not on the part of the department, Mr. Mayor. As I said, all the items that were required have been submitted and are available.
Okay. Councilmember Clark.
I will move that we take a second reading.
Okay, we have a motion for second reading. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Brost. As you know, this will take a supermajority 2/3 vote. We'll do it by voice vote and see where that goes. All in favor of a second reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2669 a second time.
Bill 2669, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing a minor subdivision plat of a 10-acre property that is located within the Shiloh subdivision, Shiloh Oaks Lane, which would thereby create 3 lots, all being within fractional survey section 33, township 45 north, range 3 east, with no parcel of ground less than 3 acres in size, and now known hereafter as the JGH subdivision, second reading.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions from any member of the council relative to Bill 2669? All right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2669.
Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
yes,
Councilmember Garitano,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nian,
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Yes.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Yes. Okay, the bill passes. Congratulations to the resident. Glad to be of assistance to you this evening. Moving next to Bill 2670. It's before the council for first reading. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Bro, seconded by Councilmember Farmer. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2670.
Bill 2670, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute an amended contract with Wilson Hydro LLC for the provision of professional services in support of the Watershed Erosion Task Force's efforts to begin the permitting process in association with 4 projects that will be required to obtain federal, state, and local agencies' approvals before construction, all of which have been identified as in critical need of repair. First reading.
Thank you. Mr. Benich, anything additional that hasn't already been provided to the council you want to mention relative to Bill 2670?
Just a couple of points, Mr. Mayor, with your permission. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as you may be aware, back at the end of 2021, a contract was signed with Wilson Hydro to begin the pre-permitting process on 3 locations. Subsequent to that action, the Watershed Erosion Task Force added a 4th location near the Highlands at Wild Horse and Strecker Road. That 4th location was presented to the City Council as a for information item at its December 13th, 2021 meeting. There were no comments. And so tonight, the department is presenting the revised contract, which would include the 4th location. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe or any comments? Councilmember Dodwell. Joe, thoughts on a second reading relative to this item?
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the offer, but we do not have a signed contract. Mr. Wilson is still reviewing it, so I will need the additional 2 weeks to complete the process.
All right, thank you for the question, Councilmember Dodwell. All right, it'll be on the agenda for the next council meeting. Moving next to Bill 2671. It's also before the council for first reading and it concerns Ward 1. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Brost. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2671.
Bill 2671, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Todd Wagner, Wagner and Associates to provide professional consulting services relating to the Reserve at Wildwood project, a 50-acre development site recommended for 132 home sites by the Planning and Zoning Commission. First reading.
Thank you. Joe, anything further you want to mention relative to this bill?
Mr. Mayor, again, just very briefly. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Department of Planning is still waiting for a response from the property owner's attorney relative to the addendum changes requested by Mr. Wagner. However, our city attorney has reviewed the requested changes to the addendum and have accepted them. So tonight, per the direction of City Council from the work session 3 weeks ago, the department has the bill prepared, and hopefully in 2 weeks, the property owner's attorney will have addressed all the issues or at least advised us of the direction they'd like to head. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Joe or any comments on the bill? All right, we'll see what happens between now and 2 weeks at the next council meeting. Moving next, Bill 2672 and 2673 appear to relate to the same subdivision, Villages of Brightleaf. And they both relate to replacement deposits. My question for the council to expedite your meeting this evening, would there be any objection to having these read in tandem in mass collectively? All right, no objection. Okay, Bill 2672 and 2673 are before the council for first reading. They both concern Ward 5. Is there a motion for the first reading of both bills? Made by Councilor McCutcheon, second by Councilmember Bertolino. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Elders, please read Bill 2672 and Bill 2673.
Bill 2672, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the approval of a replacement deposit agreement with extensions of the associated letters of credit, which are made part hereof and attached hereto for the Villages at Brightleaf subdivision, Plat 1, a 71 lot residential subdivision located in Section 1, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the northwest corner of State Route 100 and Taylor Road. First reading. Bill 2673, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the approval of a replacement deposit agreement with extensions of the associated letters of credit, which are made part hereof and attached hereto for the Villages at Brightleaf subdivision, Plat 2, a 19 lot residential subdivision located in Section 1, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the northwest corner of State Route 100 and Taylor Road. First reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bennett, anything further you want to mention relative to either Bill 2672 or Bill 2673?
Mr. Mayor, I have no specific comments relative to the two bills, other than if there are any questions, I'd be glad to try to address them at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions or comments from any member of the council? All right, seeing none, they will be on the agenda for the next council meeting. Finally, first reading is Bill, of all the first readings is Bill 2674. It concerns Ward 8. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Galani. Seconded by Councilmember Jaxi. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2674.
Bill 2674, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute all documents and other items that are necessary to vacate a multiple use trail easement to the benefit of the city of Wildwood, and then thereafter reestablish the same at a new location within the manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hill subdivision, of which the three trustees have agreed and signed said instruments to this effect, and thereby approving such. First reading.
Thank you. Mr. Vinich, anything you want to mention relative to Bill 2674?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, again, very briefly. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, as you may recall, this particular trail segment is part of a pedestrian bridge that will connect the manors at the enclaves to the manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills. When a pre-construction meeting was conducted, a grand tree was discovered, and ultimately the City Council chose to save that grand tree, which required the relocation of the multiple use trail. That relocation is being addressed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from any member of the council or any comments relative to the bill? All right. Seeing none, moving to our last item of, second to last item, resolutions. Resolution 2022-6 is before the council. It concerns Ward 8 and involves the Village Green. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 2022-6 made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Bartoni? Ms. Eldridge, please read the resolution.
Resolution number 2022-6, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, that hereby endorses and commits the sum of $700,000 representing the community's match as the project sponsor and applicant to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, LWCF, for the development of the first phase of Wildwood's Village Green project.
Thank you. Mr. Vinich, anything you want to mention relative to resolution 2022-6?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as was mentioned during work session, the $700,000 that is referenced in the title of the resolution has been set aside for 2023 as part of the 5-year capital improvements plan. Therefore, within the context of the grant process, that commitment for local match is made according to the resolution, which is a requirement of the application. Ms. Ripito and Mr. Cruz have been working very diligently on this grant application, which is one of 2 that we hope to receive for Village Green. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Dodwell.
Does the application have the initial phase 1 design components associated with it, at least an overview? When
Yes,
they
ma'am.
make that application?
Yes, ma'am. We are providing them the graphic that for the most part was shown at work session, which also has a detailed cost estimate that was provided by Human Nature and CDI, the engineering company. Thank you.
Is there any reason we can't get that attached to the resolution so our residents can find it in one spot?
Certainly, the resolution's a little bare, but the application to the particular agency, in this case, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, is in a binder. It's that big.
And a binder, okay.
Any other questions? Any other comments? All right, all in favor of the motion to adopt resolution 22-6, please say aye.
Aye.
Any? I think we need to see Joe Garetano. Councilor Garetano, we need to be able to see you if you want to vote on that.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving next to the consent agenda, we have one appointment. It's a reappointment of Mr. Hammond from Ward 3, Chris Hammond, to our Historic Preservation Commission. I provided the council with a memorandum on his background and his volunteer form. If there are no questions or comments relative to the reappointment, I would ask for a motion to approve his reappointment made by Councilmember Ottenberg, seconded by Councilmember Nyan. Any discussion on the motion to approve the reappointment of Mr. Hammond to our Historic Preservation Commission? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Anything under miscellaneous that any member of the council would like to raise? Councilmember Brost.
Yeah, I guess one item as we get deeper into the internet is if we give some thought to a format for communication of the residents, whether it's town hall, Zoom meetings. I think there's going to be residents at varying degrees of I don't want to say knowledge, but maybe knowledge or where the process stands. And I think we'd save a lot of time and be more effective if we come up with some type of a plan. So
it's an excellent idea. What about, and I'm just going to throw this out, maybe we can pick the timing of it, but maybe twice a year at least, we could have an online Zoom forum for anyone who wants to join. And we could have representatives from Spectrum. We could have our city administrator, director of planning, anyone else, and council members, mayor, whomever want to be on that to answer questions. What do you think of that?
yeah, I think that'd be good, but I think the first one should be maybe within the next 60 days.
Okay. City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, first of all, Mr. Gross, that's an excellent idea. My intention, and as I have noted to multiple residents and council members in terms that have asked about this area, that area, and so forth, my plan at the present time, perhaps in addition to what you are suggesting, is to provide ongoing updates, written updates that will be included on the city website and our social media sites. And those updates would be probably at least once a month. That's my plan. So I have committed to have full and complete transparency to the residents and to the council and anyone else interested in this, So as we, first of all, when we finish up the design plan, which we're working on now, once that is complete, my plan would be to communicate that. Spectrum has 60 days from the date we signed the contract, which was approximately around the 18th of January, somewhere around there. So 60 days would take it about mid-March. So at about mid-March, my plan would be to provide an update where we are there, which would identify where charter is going to start and provide that to the residents through those means. As charter progresses through their implementing and laying fiber, say, okay, well, their next step is going to go into this area, this subdivision, whatever, and continue at least monthly to provide those kinds of updates. So that's my plan. And then if we want to do more than that, certainly through other kinds of meetings, but I was going to be given written updates.
So with that, do you want to wait and see kind of how his approach goes, or do you want to do both?
Well, what I would just maybe for consideration is, I think the updates are great, but I think we need to have some type of a real forum for feedback.
Okay, why don't we do this? Why don't, for sunshine law reasons too, since this is not on the agenda, why don't we ask our city administrator to talk with his team and Spectrum or whatever, and at the next council meeting of the work session, come back with a recommendation, the 5-point plan for communication, which would include what he's doing, maybe your idea, probably so, frequency recommended, and then we can debate that and make a decision. How about that?
Sounds good.
Any objection to that? Okay, Councilmember Edens was next. Councilmember Edens.
I appreciate your thought train, Councilmember Brist. Because I know that I've had residents that have spoken recently that followed up and have been wondering where to get updates and have asked me some questions. But I actually just wanted to mention, I appreciate our city administrator's update, and that he had a meeting with Director Brown kind of on a debrief of how the snow removal in the city went. And I just wanted to provide some feedback from my own neighborhood. I did have a resident stop with a complaint that also contacted the department that had noticed changes in quality of service that he hadn't experienced before. But just to kind of give you an idea, we never had a fully plowed subdivision. And at one point it went from 2 lanes down to 1.5 to 1. And snow was sometimes 7 feet away from a mailbox, and an area in a T intersection really wasn't plowed as well. So if you were not expecting, or had a disability or had issues with kind of shoveling out around your mailbox, you're kind of had some delayed service. So I did get some complaints. Thanks.
Councilor Ryan.
I just wanted to go back to the internet comment really fast.
Sure.
And
Is
that's
your microphone on?
yeah.
Okay, make sure.
Gosh, nobody ever says I'm too quiet. My question was, that's great on the communication. When the design plan is finished, will there be an opportunity to tweak that plan? Or is it, you're going to update on, here's the design plan, here's the way we're going to roll it out, here's the timing of it. And that's an important update as well. But on the update, will it be once the design plan is out, will people have an opportunity to comment and express concerns and whatnot?
I think they can always comment and express concerns. Yeah.
Okay. So it's not, is it a fluid plan, or is it like, here's the plan and this is how it's going to be before anybody sees it?
City Administrator Cross.
I'm going to have to talk to Spectrum about that, to be honest. Again, I think as Mr. Young and I pointed out at the very beginning of this process, I don't know if that's me, that this is in fact Spectrum's plan. The city does have the ability to have some input. So all the information, all the emails and phone calls that I receive from residents and council members about, hey, what about this neighborhood? What about the street and so forth, have all been communicated to Spectrum. Plat maps have been provided to Spectrum regarding streets and so forth. They're out there and looking at each one of those subdivisions. Just recently today, I received communication from Spectrum saying, okay, here's what they put together, a spreadsheet of all those and what they're going to do and so forth. Ultimately, we'll be able to sit down with them and then lay out the plan. But if I'm understanding you, it would not be the intent of the city then to
Yeah.
get input from residents about that because it's their plan.
And one thing I would just add to that, and what I'm getting ready to say is not to say that we're not interested in having resident input. We are a very resident-centric city. And always open to their input on rollouts of anything. But at the end of the day, with a project of this magnitude, I would submit respectively, the last thing we want to have are so many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, that we end up with what is by all accounts it's going to be a tremendously successful program getting bogged down in bureaucracy. So I think there's a happy medium and we can find a way I think we've asked our city administrator to come up with a plan for communication and to funnel and efficiently work in where we can the residents' input. But I would just caution us not to get to the point that we're nitpicking this thing to the position that it becomes unmoving and just kind of stagnant. Anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that. I
Okay.
I appreciate that very much. But I will say that I will offer that council and your residents, I will encourage you that if you hear and somebody asks a question, please send me that email.
Yeah.
Because this is a living process. And as they're going forward and they're laying fiber in certain areas, if there's something that they can just do a jog over here. So it's not like the design plan that's it. But again, we're going to kind of control the process but I'll be the funnel and I will continue to provide that information to Spectrum as I hear from you all, or you all hear from your residents, or the residents contact me, and we'll work that in, because remember, this is a 2-year project. They're going to start here and they're going to move in a logical means, but that doesn't mean that we can't tie on. So I'm happy to do that.
And I wasn't meaning to imply in any way that you were proposing nitpicking on this. I just want to. That's all right. Okay, Councilmember Garitano.
Yeah, thank you. And hopefully you can see me. I'm taking the meeting from my car in Jefferson City. And I did want to share that tomorrow I will be here and Councilmember Ottenberg will be here as well for the legislative conference. And then we'll be meeting with our legislative consultant for the city to meet with several officials just to do introductions and hopefully continue to advocate for the needs of our city. So just wanted to share that and apologize for the poor lighting that you had to put up with.
No problem. Thank you for your work. Yes. See, sure. City Administrator Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. Since Councilmember Garitano mentioned about our political consultant, he will be here as he will every month at the second council meeting of each month. So he's not here now, but the next one he will be here. So if you have any questions or anything that perhaps I can give him advance notice, please send it to me and I'm happy to send it on to him so that he has some, and we can save some time. So he will be here on the 28th and we'll be at the second council meeting each and every month.
Okay, thank you. Anything further under miscellaneous? Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Would someone like to make that? Councilmember Jaxie, seconded by Councilmember Galani. Non-debatable. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you again for another good meeting.